announcement that you're going to stop that countries that are not cooperating with us about getting the details of known criminals, that we might make it much harder for people from that country to come here.
So let me jump in. Sorry. So is Saudi Arabia going to be on that list? Doubt it. Is China going to be on that list? I mean, China's helping a dictator and supplying them with whatever's necessary to build their nuclear capability. But you think that Trump is going to do anything against China? Really do anything against China?
So, but look, the China-North Korea situation is a little bit different. If China is helping find stolen passports and track terrorists and criminals, but they're not helping with North Korea, it's just a separate issue. If we find out that there are non-Muslim nations that are not doing these things, but we let them in anyway, then you guys are 100% right. If it only applies to Muslim nations.
But that's what he's trying. I mean, that's what they want, a political win, and they like scapegoating Muslims. And I'm not pretending that there aren't that we don't have an issue with a lot of Muslim majority countries who may not be cooperating with us in a very tangible way that they ought to be cooperating in the war on terror, to borrow their phrase. Then I got no problem with that. I'd be with you that, of course, this is what would happen on a regular basis between the Department of Homeland Security and security officials in countries around the world. Like, hey, we need this cooperation. If you don't cooperate, I don't care about using the stick either. I might prevent everyone in your country from coming over. And maybe that'll work, right? But the goal here won't be about coming up with a policy that actually makes people safe. It's inconceivable. That's not what they cared about. That's why we know that they didn't care about it, because of the very nature of the way the first Muslim ban was orchestrated and the countries that were exempt from it.
But last thing on this, guys, it's possible that we're talking about two different factions within the White House and the administration. So did Trump do the original Muslim ban because he was trying to get biometric information? No. He said it during the campaign, and he said it's a total and complete ban on all Muslims. He did it against votes from bigots, and it was a Steve Bannon strategy. But this is Department of Homeland Security, and it might be General McMaster who runs that, who's saying, let me try to make something positive out of something negative. All right, a Muslim ban is disastrous and un-American. I'll turn it into something that's productive, and then I'll tell Trump, oh, this is the ban you were looking for, President Trump. I think that has a decent chance of being true.
Maybe that's another way of looking at it, and if that's true, then okay. But I mean, it would be a rare moment of competency and thoughtfulness and policy awareness from this administration.
And finally,
in an area that the president himself has demagogued about consistently.
But remember, the Bannons are out. And the Gorkas are out, and those guys. So there's still Stephen Miller, there's still some really bad guys, and there's a bad guy named Trump that's still in office. But some of the competent guys have taken over some of the functions inside the government. Now, that doesn't mean that Trump is going to listen to them. So this could be their plan, and they bring in the Trump, and he goes, no, I meant just ban Muslims randomly. He just vetoes it. So that's entirely possible. But if they execute the plan as the Wall Street Journal has it and is reporting it, then it wouldn't be so bad.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I read it and I thought the same. I thought, well, it has the feel and the sound of competence, but I'm still more with Anna. Like, you're going to have to show me competence a few times before I believe that that's going to come about.
Yeah.
I hear you.
All right.
I like to say, fool me once, shame on. You won't get fooled again.
All right. So.
That guy was smarter.
That's true and incredibly depressing.
Yes. All right. While the Trump administration drafts policy that would potentially ban travel from even more countries into the United States because of threats of terrorism, well, turns out that Trump is amping up, or ramping up, I should say, terrorism in other countries, like Yemen. So let me explain. During the Obama administration, the number of drone strikes that unfortunately ended up killing civilians abroad increased. According to The Atlantic, Obama presided over roughly 10 times as many lethal airstrikes as George W. Bush in covert war on terror operations outside the war zones of Iraq and Afghanistan. Also include Yemen to that list, okay? US strikes in just 3 countries, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen, killed at least 384 innocent civilians. Now again, this is under the Obama administration, and it's something that we criticized him for quite a bit. Well, Trump looked at that policy and said, not good enough. let's do more. In fact, there might be a little too much oversight when it comes to these drone strikes. So let's loosen some of the rules necessary to move forward with even more of these strikes. So the Trump administration is preparing to dismantle key Obama-era limits on drone strikes and commando raids outside conventional battlefields, okay? So they're going to essentially target lower level individuals that they suspect of being terrorists or aiding terrorists. The targets of kill missions would be expanded to include foot soldier jihadists with no special skills or leadership roles. Proposed drone attacks and raids would no longer undergo high level vetting.
Oh, great.
So this is, look, so the reason why I don't believe the Department of Homeland Security in their new policy, they're drafting new policy to do even more travel bans in even more countries because they want to keep us safe, right? If they genuinely cared about keeping us safe, this is the kind of stuff that they would try to, reel back in. But instead, they're expanding what the Obama administration did wrong. They want to do away with anything he did right, but anything he did wrong, they want to expand it. And this leads to way more hostility toward the Western world, okay? If your family gets murdered and the US government refers to them as collateral damage, how easy is it for ISIS to recruit you? It's just such dumb foreign policy, right? And so if you're worried about terrorists abroad, your travel bans are cute, but you need to really rethink this foreign policy that has failed us time and time again.
So from time to time, people will say, oh yeah, Trump's doing this, but did you know that Obama also did it? And did you criticize him when he did it? Yeah, we did. We most certainly did. And so Obama's team would claim that their strikes were, quote, exceptionally surgical and precise. And that was nonsense, and we called it the nonsense that it was over and over again. Anna gave you the 384 innocent civilians killed at least. That's the low end. It is potentially as high as 807 civilians killed. If that's surgical and precise, Jesus, what's butchery? 807 civilians. Look, don't get lost in the numbers. That's real human beings, kids, aunts, uncles, moms. Just picture them as humans. The Atlantic did a great job here, wonderful piece of writing in making it real. They said, look, for example, there's homegrown terrorists like the guys in San Bernardino. Remember that couple that did the shooting? Imagine if they said, well, look, we're gonna do a surgical and precise drone strike to take that guy out so he doesn't kill people inside America. That's even more dangerous than killing some guy in Yemen or Somalia that's our ally, right? So we did a drone strike on them, and don't worry, we got them, which by the way, a lot of times they don't get them. But we also killed 13 of your kids in an elementary school nearby in that drone strike. Who would say yes to that? Nobody would, right?
Well,
that would be
Donald Trump.
Well, right. That would be grotesque and barbarian. But when we do it to their kids, we think, well, it's no big deal. I mean, that's 807 pieces of collateral damage. But then when they're also human, they also get really, really mad if you kill their kids. And so when that leads to that more people fighting against us, we shouldn't be surprised. And by the way, the war machine ticks on. And I'm not at all convinced that this is accidentally counterproductive. And so no matter who's president, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, what do the generals who are about to get millions of dollars from defense contractors come in and tell them? They say, oh, you need more drone strikes. You need to kill more people. And don't worry about civilians. Oh, we're so precise. Yeah.
I don't think you're right about that attitude, because I think that the Obama administration did give, as they said, what they considered exceptionally surgical and precise. And I think it's war, and you're dropping a bomb on a civilian population, and this is what's going to happen. So better would be for us to recognize, hey, you want to go kill terrorists in Yemen? You want to go kill them outside the accepted two wars that we're fighting, right? Then you're going to kill kids.
Yeah.
You're going to kill kids. And so I imagine that number, let's say it's 600, put it right in the middle. It's not 384, it's not 807. I'm sure it could have been 1,600. We dropped a lot of drones, and they're all huge bombs, right? And it's not always on a convoy in the middle of the desert, totally by itself.
Okay, so another way of looking at this is that those drone strikes from Obama killed at least 128 times more innocent people than the Boston Marathon bombing. 128 times.
That's why, it's a It's why it's valuable. It's not just valuable, it's critical that we see battlefield footage from, that we see dead Americans, that we see Americans killed in action. I've seen 38 minutes of Ken Burns' Vietnam documentary, and it's already amazing. Mostly because who's in it are Vietnamese, right? And it becomes very easy when it's the other. And for me too, and we're all experiencing it with the hurricane, right? I mean, it tears through St. Martin and destroys St. Martin, and lawlessness reigns on St. Martin because there is no law and the world has essentially been wiped out, right? And we don't, it's hard to care, right? But if it hits Florida, we care. We're having a tough time caring about Puerto Rico. I've already had 6 conversations with people where I remind them that Puerto Rico's in the US, and I'm not exempting myself from it. I don't feel the same way, right? And that bothers me, right? And those are Americans. So when it's other people, when it's other kids, when it's Yemeni kids, well, they're surrounded by terrorists, and the real people to blame are the terrorists who are essentially using human shields, and they're using Yemen as a base, and all of that is true. But we still did it, and the question is, did we win? Are we made safer, and is the world made safer long term by doing this? There are very serious people whose voices are at least heard now who argue now, no, that this actually makes us and the world and perhaps Yemen less safe. And we wouldn't, sorry, last thing, we wouldn't do it. The thing about drones, it's a little unfair to say he used it 10 times more than George W. Bush. He also used it 1,000,000,000% more than Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan, and now it's easy, right? We press a button and the drone strikes can be done so easily, and we don't have to send in troops. So man, it is totally antiseptic. We feel good, and we don't want to send troops. We don't want to send 5,000 American commandos into Yemen where people are going to shoot at them, and then we know it's messy. Here, man,
I don't even think, but I also don't want to fight some other country's war, which is what we're doing in Yemen right now, right? We're in Yemen doing these drone strikes for Saudi Arabia, and I don't think most Americans know that. What they do is they, lie to the American people about how there's a terroristic. I don't even think most Americans know what we're doing in Yemen, right?
That's the truest thing anyone's ever said.
And so that is just. It's criminal. It's criminal. Like we're killing innocent individuals in a country that most Americans don't even know that we're doing drone strikes on. We're using our resources to do so. It's so frustrating, and it just continues on. And I'm with you, Cenk. I don't think that this is an accident. I feel like things are intentionally escalated because there's a profit motive behind it.
So look, last couple of things here. One of the things we warned about during the Obama administration is if you open a door, the next president can walk right through it. So the door that Obama opened with the drone strikes and killing civilians was already bad enough. You didn't need anyone else to walk through it. It wasn't like, oh, someone else can abuse it. Obama abused it. And there I have a little disagreement with Ben there. I don't think they were very careful at all. They would do signature strikes where they didn't even know who they were bombing. Like, hey, fool me once, shame on you. I mean, I don't want to get back into the Bush quotes, but in terms of Obama, if his guys come in and go, Mr. President, we're incredibly careful. Oh, oops, sorry, we killed 17 kids. The next time they say it again and again and again. Maybe the 4th time you go, hey, you know what? I'm getting the sense you guys aren't that careful. At the 600th civilian killed on your watch, I'm getting the sense you guys are not that careful. So I blame Obama completely for that. Now, of course, you have Trump, who's a monster who doesn't care at all. So he's like, thank you so much. A rare actual thanks, Obama, for opening that door. I'm now going to fly through it and just take and say, if they were careful, which they weren't, I don't want you to be careful at all. Go nuts, do more drone strikes. Don't even vet them. I mean, to say we're not even going to vet them is unbelievable.
What we do know, here's what we know, and I don't disagree with you at all, really, on who bears responsibility for the 400 to 800 civilians killed under the Obama administration. It's Obama, and you just have to prioritize whether it was worth it. Was it worth it fighting Saudi Arabia's war?
Hell no.
Right, so obviously some people think so. What I am objecting to is the characterization that the people doing it don't care. I don't know whether they care, I have no idea. I imagine that they do, and almost to me worse is that they care and they still make an assessment that this is the kind of country we want, that this is still better.
So I just want to quickly reply to what you said, because I wish I knew that the conversation would go in this direction because I'd have the article in front of me. But several years ago, The Intercept had this incredible expose regarding drone strikes abroad and the type of intelligence that the Defense Department relies on in order to give the green light for these drone strikes. And time again, that article exposed that they would rely on what they knew was faulty intel. And so they would rely on cell phone GPS, and it turns out that it was a cell phone that actually belonged to a completely innocent person. Drop a drone strike on that person, and so and by the way, they would be alerted to these issues, and they completely ignored them. And so again, The Intercept reported this several years ago. I'm going to look for the story and tweet it out, but it was definitely illuminating. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to stop if we genuinely care about, stopping terrorism.
Part of the way that they keep count is body count. And so, hey, we killed X number of terrorists. Are they actually terrorists? Well, maybe we got the wrong GPS, maybe we got the wrong cell phone, or maybe we got the right cell phone, but he'd handed it to his mom.
Well, how many, and I'm just curious since I didn't, how many jihadists did we kill with these drone strikes?
Yeah, all the numbers are completely unreliable.
But then ultimately, you as a country make that assessment. Suppose it's 8,000.
There's no way it was 8,000.
Okay, suppose it's 5,000.
Okay.
But whatever, pick a number. 4,000, 400 civilians, 4,000. Are we comfortable killing 10 jihad? Right, so I mean, that's the conversation that you want us to have as a country. But because we don't see it, we don't see dead Americans. We don't see Americans put into harm's way. We certainly don't see dead civilians that Americans killed. For some reason, with this free media that we have, with an unchecked media, that we don't see it. I think it would change it if we saw it. We have made war and death totally antiseptic in this country, and it is a huge mistake. And drone warfare is antiseptic for us, not for them.
I mean, think about it. We will put someone in solitary confinement for who knows how long if they have the audacity to leak footage of us, bombing innocent people, or bombing people in general. So,
but actually bombing innocent people, gets you nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to take another break, guys. We'll be right back. We have more amazing stories for you guys, including Facebook's admission that, oops, yeah, the Russians bought ads all over us. And what you do about that, though, is a much harder question. Let's tackle that when we come back. All right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk, Ben, and Anna with you guys. Jasmine Desi 16 says, I agree 100% with Anna and Ben. I assume that's on the travel ban story. I see you, Jasmine. I see what you're saying. Okay. Edward says, so they want to save us from terrorists so we can die from no health care. Okay, good point. Adrian Munoz says TYT for the win at the Streamies. Thank you, but remember to include hashtag TYT for Streamies. Okay, that's FOR, TYT for Streamies. So that counts as a vote. Retweets of that also counts as a vote. So we can win Show of the Year, the best show on the internet. That would be amazing. Jenny Dennis Saxena says, decade after decade, we fight the enemy we made in the last covert action. Only the military-industrial complex benefits.
Yep.
It's great points. And the members of the day are Ben Smith and Paul Eastwick. I think we had a wonderful post game yesterday where I told insane Uber stories. Did I deliver on those stories?
You did, yes. One of them was particularly insane.
Yeah. Yes, so check that out if you're a member. Of course, members have access to all the archives, all the shows, all the post games, all the old schools, etc. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
All right. Hurricane Maria has left complete and utter devastation in Puerto Rico, and so far we have learned that 6 people have lost their lives as a result. Authorities are expecting the number to increase as the recovery efforts move forward. However, the deaths have been caused by a variety of issues related to the storm, including mudslides and severe flooding. Now, authorities have been hampered in their ability to assess damage because foul weather continues to batter parts of the island, as well as the fact that the storm knocked out power and communication systems across the island. There are also reports that there is a bridge that's expected to collapse, and as a result, more than 70,000 people have been evacuated from the town that they live in, or they are in the process of being evacuated. Just to give you some more information, officials warn residents that it could actually be months before power is restored.
Months,
yeah.
Unbelievable.
So things are not good in Puerto Rico, and it's really devastating, especially when you consider, the state that Puerto Rico was already in with its economic crisis.
And the fact that several different hurricanes have hit the Caribbean already. Look, I was just in Miami and it got grazed and it was still a mess. And Puerto Rico had gotten hit by some of the other storms, but this one hit it
It's the first
full on.
storm that full on hit Puerto Rico, I think, since 1932.
Yeah, it's the worst storm in 80 years for Puerto Rico. I think we got some video of what's happened here. To me, the things that are amazing are it lifted and ripped the roofs off of not just homes, but some giant shopping centers. And I was talking to my friends in New York who had lived through Superstorm Sandy, and that was just 50-mile-per-hour winds. And they said it was ferocious. And these were 160-mile-hour winds. So this is Mother Nature sending a message. And it's not because it's intended and it's conscious. It's just, hey, this is storms getting more severe. This is what happens when the water is warmer and the weather is warmer. You have more precipitation, more severe storms, and now it's moving on to the Bahamas where they think it might dump 20 inches of rain.
So I wanted to quickly clarify a statement that I made earlier because I misspoke when I said that a bridge was going to collapse. It's actually a dam that's expected to collapse. So to be more specific, it's the Oaxaca Dam, and they're expecting it to fail, which is prompting these mass evacuations from the area just to ensure that people don't die from extreme flooding. It's a 345-yard dam that holds back a man-made lake covering about 2 square miles and was built decades ago.
So a bridge collapsing is disastrous. A dam collapsing is worse.
Way worse, yeah.
And the Rush Limbaughs of the world, if it doesn't hit his exact house at 160 miles per hour, thinks it didn't happen. Well, the people of Puerto Rico know it's happening.
Yeah, and I just think it's strange that, and again, I hold myself responsible for this a little, that unless it hits the US mainland, that we somehow, I'm bothered that I don't care as much about, that there's an earthquake in Mexico, it collapsed a school. It's not that I don't care as much, but we're conditioned to care about the things that are closest to us. I mean, for crying out loud, an earthquake, it hits in Mexico. We live in Los Angeles. We live on a fault line, and an earthquake could hit here. And we all of us, I include myself, we got to think more globally. And the Puerto Ricans are Americans. There are literal American brothers. And you're talking about months of no electricity on an entire island, and there's going to be a breakdown of societal order. And so if you can give, and I've given, and if you can give.
Yeah, and in the earthquake in Mexico, man, I was reading the story of the schools that had collapsed and parents waiting all night, and they're pulling out one dead kid after another, and then they pulled out 3 kids who were alive. And Jesus, man. And so it's just harrowing, but it's unfortunate part of humanity that we care more as it gets closer to us. Look at what's happening in Myanmar.
It relates to what we were just talking about in Yemen, of why this is an easier story for many Americans that we killed between 400 and 800 Yemeni civilians, because they're so unlike us, even though, of course, they're not. There's nothing. They're in fact almost exactly like us.
Yeah, and so you got the Rohingya Muslims. Hundreds of thousands have been driven out of the country, hundreds butchered, burned alive. I mean, if ISIS had done that to Europeans or Americans,
even Yazidis, right?
Or even Yazidis, we would have invaded and bombed and etc. But when it happens halfway across the world and it happens to people we can't relate to, Nah,
Because
we've gotten almost. Look, the media's covered a little bit. The government, U.S. government reaction has been a deafening silence.
Yeah, and that's been true, of course, for Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, for and of course the ISIS and killing Yazidis, and we in general we were taught to care more about that because we've been conditioned to believe that ISIS poses an immediate threat to us, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what's happening to the Rohingya Muslims doesn't, and what's happening in Yemen, again, the theory is it's our war on terror, so whatever's happening that's terrible, but it's making us safer. And that's just a thing we think and say and are conditioned to say because we want to normalize the most horrible things in the world. We have to, and we can't react to the Mexican quake and the devastation in Puerto Rico. I don't have the emotional capacity to, I assume most people don't, to really feel it as it probably ought to be felt. But we don't feel it. We don't, again, and I'm just bothered by it. I know what you say is true, that as it gets closer to us, we're conditioned more. It's not enough for me to stop there. I know I'm part of it because I have the exact same, I'm conditioned the exact same way, but it should not be that way. It shouldn't be that way.
And finally, look, guys, you should help in all these different situations in any way that you can. But there's almost nothing you can do about an earthquake. So there's the after the fact helping, donating, etc., which you should definitely do. But before the fact, there is something that, and people will say we can do about terrorism. Fair enough, and I hope we have a smart strategy for that. We haven't had one yet, but I hope we have one. But there's also something we can do about climate change. It makes the storms more severe. So we have to make sure that the planet doesn't heat up, because as devastating as all of these hurricanes hitting all at once have been, it's still an appetizer for what's to come. And that is not a situation that is going to be pretty for anybody, and no one is going to be safe, no matter where they are in the world.
All right, we got to take a final break. Let's do that, and when we come back, Facebook and some drama involving Russian trolls advertising on its platform.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk, Ben, and Anna with you guys. I'm in the middle of a banana hour, or 2 banana hours. All right, what else we got, Anna?
All right. Through an internal investigation, executives at Facebook found that there were as many as 470 Russia-linked accounts that had bought 3,000 Facebook ads in order to have some influence over this past election. Most of these ads were pro-Trump, anti-Hillary, and now Facebook has decided to participate in investigations. They have turned over this data to Robert Mueller as he continues his investigation on Russian collusion. And it's interesting because I think that they are now participating in this investigation and cooperating with Congress with all the data that they're requesting, because Congress is now thinking about passing regulations pertaining to social media and political ads on social media. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to television, the FEC gets involved and they ensure that these political ads clearly state who the person or people behind them are. So they have to clearly state who the sponsor is for those ads. That is not true of social media and political ads on those platforms. And so now politicians are thinking, primarily Democratic politicians, are thinking about drafting legislation that would make that mandatory, among other regulations.
Well, I don't understand, Anna. I was told by some, there's no evidence that Russia meddled. There's no evidence. Well, oops, turns out there is evidence.
Yeah.
Russian meddling, it is not an issue. It is so obvious, and the hesitancy of some on the left to just fully embrace the obviousness of Russian. They do it all the time, and they were bold enough to do it.
How dare you, Ben?
Right, and so
I guess you want World War III with Russia.
Right, that's right. That's right. I war. It's just like the people who say that this is just that this is a Red Scare and it's just like the McCarthy hearings have not read 2 sentences about the McCarthy hearings. So yeah, I don't know what evidence there is that Trump knew about it or orchestrated it. I have no idea. That may never be anything. But they definitely tried to influence the election, and it would appear to succeed.
Right, and so I think people get very uncomfortable once you start talking about they succeeded. They wanted to influence the election, they succeeded. Because to blame all of it on Russia, I think, just rubs people the wrong way. There were a number of factors that led to this unfortunate outcome of the election, right?
Can I just settle that for once and for all? So
believe me, it's not going to settle it for once and for all.
No, once I say it, it'll be done.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to solve it.
I'm solving it right now. Okay, because guys, the two different camps there are driving me crazy. So did Russia swing the election? It was 78,000 votes in 3 different states, 39,000 going in the opposite direction, results in a different president. So almost everything swung the election. The weather swung the election. The Russians did. Facebook did. And not putting Bernie on the ticket did. Not putting Bernie at the top of the ticket did. I mean, every single thing mattered. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean it's the only thing that mattered. Right? So both sides who are seeing in some weird black and white things, no, none of it mattered, none of it mattered. Don't be ridiculous. On the other hand, the people are like, since Russia mattered, it's the only thing that mattered. No, she also ran a terrible campaign that mattered more. But this clearly also mattered.
Sure,
right.
I will say that's unquestionably true. We've discussed that and agreed from the start on that, there's no doubt. However, one of those things is really not like the other. 2 of those things, Comey and the Russians. The other things are politics, right? I mean, it's true that she ran, even when the things that she did well in the campaign, she didn't get credit for it because it was her, because whatever, that's politics, right? That was picking the wrong candidate at the wrong time, I think, despite her qualifications. So Bernie, that's politics, man. The guy ran against her, did he support her enough? I don't know, seemed to support her a lot. More of Bernie's voters voted for her than Hillary's voters voted for Obama in 08. That's an incontrovertible fact, right? So that's what happens. Sometimes the losing candidate's voters never vote for the person at the top of the ticket because they're pissed. So those things are politics. The world's other great power, putting its resources into choosing one person over another and tricking us into thinking they weren't doing it subtly, and the involvement of Comey at 10 days before the election, those were very strange, abnormal factors. So it's okay with me if we focus on those a little bit more. But that said, the notion that those are the only things that swung the election that was determined by a swing of 39,000 votes. Undoubtedly, all those things that.
But let me just say real quick though, look, but there's going to be curveballs in an election. You need the candidate to get past those curveballs.
That's right.
I would put Comey in the curveball category. Russia's in a slightly different category because that's a different state influencing our elections. I know that we as America have done that countless times abroad as well. We shouldn't do it. Russia shouldn't do it. But since it's our country and it's our democracy that they're meddling with, there should be consequences. No, not war. Just calm down, okay? But at the same time, for our government to go, oh, you helped to swing our election by illegally spending money in our elections and clearly supporting one candidate over the other. Whatever.
I'm going to.
Okay, so I just real
that's
quick,
unacceptable.
Real quick, maybe I'm the bad guy because I don't really care too much about consequences for Russia. First of all, I 100% do not want to go to war with Russia.
Nobody does. That's
no one wants to go to war with Russia. And anyone who says like, oh, they're just like fear mongering to head in that direction, you're wrong. That's not what's happening. But what I care about more than anything is what are we gonna do as a country to prevent it in the future, right? Yes. If we're gonna do sanctions with Russia, fine, whatever. Again, maybe I'm the bad guy, but I don't really care. I care way more about finding where our weaknesses are and preventing it from happening again in the future, right? Because social media is still relatively new and it is unregulated. And so now there's talk about regulation. And I think that, that starts entering some scary territory, but obviously something needs to be done. And I don't care if it's something that's positively impacting Democrats and negatively impacting Republicans. I still don't think it's right. You don't want a foreign country to have any influence or any say over our election or politics.
Also, it's Russia, it's Putin. It was sinister, right? I mean, it's not like the French were like, I want this election to be the fairest one America has. How do we do that, right? It wasn't Canada being like, what can we do to help, right? How can we exert? So it was nefarious. So But Anna, but screw you and you're looking to the future. That's inappropriate. We want to look back. No, okay. So real quick, can I say something before? Yeah, so I agree with Anna totally. That's obviously how we should be approaching this. Sanction, I don't care, I don't know. What we do with Russia is a more consequential question for later. It's not war and it's not messing with their election, right?
Right.
But to your Comey was a curveball. It's more than a curveball. It's like they threw a fastball and they threw it from 40 feet. Like it was that kind of thing never happens that close, right? It just doesn't. Yes, it was technically because he was part of the government and there was an investigation. You can make an argument that it was a curveball, but it really wasn't a curveball. The Russians the umpires were robots, and they were like, no matter what the pitch was, it was a strike. You know, like, it was in the dirt, right?
Yeah, and that's much worse. So okay, so lastly on this is to just further support what Anna's saying. Look, some regulations around the internet, government meddling, and by the way, it's big time supported by TV, who hates the internet and views it as competition. They're ecstatic about the story. They're like, yes, regulate Facebook and the others. I'm a little worried about that. Could you do some stuff around the edges? Like Facebook has hired 250 people to track this. That's good. They've kicked out the 470 fake Russian accounts. That's good. By the way, they were almost all, from what we can see in the press so far, pro-Trump. So if you followed being patriotic, secured borders, or all these other things, and you thought you were being patriotic, you were actually getting used as a tool of our enemies. So nice job, right-wingers. You are as stupid as you look. Okay, and now, so some regulations around the edges, okay, that's fine. But the main thing that our government has to do is to make sure they cannot hack the vote. Because they did try in this election. That's a way bigger story. They tried to infiltrate voter databases, and they did. They didn't hack the vote as far as we know, but they infiltrated the voter databases in several states.
I think in the 30s, right?
Yeah, and if they're close to doing that last time around, they're going to only get better next time around. Right. And for Trump administration, who claims that they care about voter fraud, but then is doing nothing about Russia possibly hacking into our voter files and doing mass voter fraud to steal elections, that is unconscionable.
God, we're done.
I know, but why would he, Cenk? Think about it. Why would he? He's already this insecure little guy. Like, that's the way I see him. He's incredibly insecure, which is why he's constantly talking about crowd sizes. He's constantly talking about how popular he is and how much everyone loves him. He's insecure. So in his eyes, acknowledging Russian involvement delegitimizes this past election. And he's so insecure about that, he's not gonna do anything about Russia.
No, I know, but and by the way, since they're supporting him, he thinks, well, maybe they'll help steal the next election for me. So this guy is not on our side. And so two things that are absolutely clear from that. When Donald Trump talks about voter fraud, he is a total fraud, complete liar. All it is to make sure people who are more likely to be Democratic, like African-American voters, students, etc., cannot vote. They don't care about voter fraud at all. If they did, they'd be going ballistic to make sure the Russians are not hacking our elections. And then finally, Trump tweeted, "The Russia hoax continues. Now it's on Facebook. What about the totally biased and dishonest media coverage in favor of crooked Hillary?" In other words, the guy who attacks everyone, bullies everyone, Democrats, Republicans, the media, the one guy he won't touch is Vladimir Putin. You think that's a coincidence? And when there is evidence that the Russians did meddle in our elections, he's like, it's a hoax, whatever you do, don't say anything about Putin, don't say anything about, you think he's not involved? Look, we need a smoking gun. I hope Mueller finds it, but this guy thinks the Russians did it and can't wait to cover it up. The only people who can't see that are the ones that are just absolutely blinded by partisanship.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we're in a weird situation. Okay, we got a couple of minutes left here. But let me just give you a quick poll, and then I want to take a quick break, and I know we'll lose the Sirius Satellite audience at that, but let's stay on and just do two more stories for the online audience at tytnetwork.com. When asked, Americans said 54% said that Russia-backed content on social media did move the 2016 election. Now, you don't need a poll to show that. It either did or it didn't, and whether Americans think it did is not determinative of whether it did. But at least it's a majority of the country saying, yeah, of course it moved the elections. And so I think people are there on that.
How many say it didn't?
It is mainly Republicans, of course, and 43% say that no, that it's not too or at all likely that it made a difference. So 54 to 43, 82% of Democrats think it made a difference. Only 15% of Republicans.
Nobody said anything about math. I mean, because to that point, if they did it, anything made a difference. Any little thing could have made a difference.
That's right. All right, so anyway, if you're at Sirius Satellite Radio or you're watching or listening anywhere else, if you want to get the whole show, God bless your heart, go become a member, tytnetwork.com/join, and you get the whole show commercial free. We're trying to provide a service for you guys there. Think of it kind of like the HBO of news, and you get all of our shows, including Aggressive Progressive, Old School, all of our post games, where we talked about those hilarious Uber stories and my arrest story, which was also interesting, etc. So do that. And then lastly, I started the show talking about the shirts, but we do have some fun shirts. So go to shoptyt.com. And if it's not this one, it's Ben's. Okay, no, we don't have that one. No, okay, nice. Anyway, fly the colors, guys, fly the colors. You wear Young Turks, you will run into people and they'll talk to you, and you'll be surprised at how many people you meet.
Fist bump strangers.
All right, for the online audience, we'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks. We have a couple of Comey-related stories that we really wanted to share with you guys.
Yes.
All right, so go for it, Anna.
All right. James Comey was giving a speech, or attempting to give a speech, at Howard University, and there were student protesters who didn't want to have anything to do with it. In fact, they wanted to do everything to stop it. Take a look.
And I love the enthusiasm of the young folks. I just wish they would understand what a conversation is. A conversation is where you speak and I listen, and then I speak and you listen, and we go back and forth and back and forth. And at the end of a conversation, we're both slaughtered.
So he did manage to finish his speech, and keep in mind that he has been appointed by Howard University to serve as the chair in public policy for the 2017-2018 academic year. And so this raises the same question, the same issue that's been coming up quite a bit lately on college campuses, the issue of free speech. And in this case, he managed to finish his speech, but the students were being very persistent in interrupting him and trying to prevent him from doing so.
I was a little surprised at this story because I don't know which way they're going to go on Comey, because Comey's such a complicated character.
Yeah.
So yes, he might have cost the Democrats the election, as we've talked about many times, and as well as many other factors, including Hillary Clinton. But at the same time, he was pursuing Donald Trump and was fired for it. Or at least had begun to pursue Donald Trump. So I guess I was slightly surprised that they had this reaction. Although you can't beat the chant of "Get out, James Comey, you're not our homie."
You cannot. The chant. You know how I feel about chanting. That's a great chant.
Yeah,
it's a great chant.
Ben Mankiewicz, who's notoriously anti-chanting, approves of that chant.
Yeah, I might have chanted that. It's really complicated because they have a right to protest the speech, but once a guy's giving a speech, you should let him give the speech, And
yeah, I don't think that part's that complicated, actually. So yeah, I didn't know which way they were going to go on Comey politically, but once you disagree with him, which is a perfectly fair thing to do, super fair. I think that the way I think it was Notre Dame students handled Mike Pence was better, where they made it clear that they were opposed to him, and they got up, and some walked out, and I think most turned their backs on him. So that allowed him to make his speech, but made a political point. Now, right-wingers get hurt no matter what. They think that they have a right to speak and everyone must love what they say. That's just not how it works. But especially on a college campus, I think everybody should be allowed to speak. And so Pence got to finish his speech. Now, Comey did it anyway, he soldiered on, but I wouldn't have tried to, and the other thing, I think they did it with Pence, I'm not positive, but the chant in the beginning, give it a couple of minutes. You make your point. You want to turn around. You want to walk out. You want to do all those things. Great.
You want to boo him afterwards, you know, or something. But
yeah. But after the first couple of minutes and you've done a fun chant, then let the guy speak. That's my take on it.
No, I think it's the right take. I mean, it's important, and there is supposed to, and college campuses are supposed to be, you know, the idea that there should be a free exchange of ideas is important, and at college campuses, it's not really a First Amendment issue. Nobody's getting arrested, nobody's going to prison, the government's not stopping anybody from speaking. But the free exchange of ideas, I think at colleges is important.
Yeah.
And the notion that there are some on the left who are opposed to that or bothers me, no question that it bothers me.
So there are those on the left and the right who are opposed to that, and there was a pretty devastating study done by the Brookings Institution in regard to free speech on college campuses and how students feel about it. And this is so discouraging because it's worse than I thought, okay? The number of students who actually don't care that much about free speech, based on the results of this study, concerns me because a college campus is supposed to be a free marketplace of ideas, and it is a slippery slope. I hate slippery slope arguments, but if you start censoring speakers or banning speakers, first of all, no political party or political group should dictate what all the students get to hear on that campus, right? So if you're a liberal student and you hate these conservative speakers, I hear you, but not everyone on campus is liberal, and conservatives, you know, should have the right to hear from people that they're interested in hearing from as well, and vice versa, right? So let me give you the details of this survey because it's devastating. So a student group so they asked a bunch of questions. Here's one of the questions that Brookings Institution asked. A student group opposed to the speaker disrupts the speech by loudly and repeatedly shouting so that the audience cannot hear the speaker. Do you agree or disagree that the student group's actions are acceptable? Well, here is a graph showing you the number of people who agree. So 51% of these students surveyed said that they agree, okay? The majority, not small majority.
It's okay to drown them out.
It's okay to drown them out and not allow the audience to hear this person's speech or message.
That's depressingly high.
That is depressingly high. Now let's go back. Among students who identify as Democrats, the amount is 62% who think that this is okay. Among Republicans, it's 39%, independents, 45%. When it comes to females, 47%. Males, surprisingly, 57%. So males are more likely than females to think that this type of behavior is acceptable. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
Okay, before we do, let's just note that, come on, Democrats, you're supposed to be better than that. So the right wing is more authoritarian, and usually authoritarian leads to shutting down opposition speech. Progressive is supposed to be more open-minded. And I get it, there's a lot of pent-up frustration about the right wing steamrolling progressives. Not necessarily progressives, but certainly the Democratic Party over the last couple of decades. But this is not the right way to fight back. And look, shutting down other people's opinions is always in some way an admission of defeat.
Yep.
And you should never admit that. So when fundamentalists use violence to strike out against others, so let's say a fundamentalist Muslim or wants to kill someone because they've insulted his religion, that just means he doesn't think he's right and he can't debate with you, so he's resorting to violence rather than ideas. But shouting people down so they're not allowed to speak is a needless admission, like that you're almost not afraid of those ideas, but that you don't even want to allow it. It's just totally unnecessary. Just let them speak. They're deeply unpopular opinions. They're not going to get any traction, and you will easily defeat them in the battlefield of ideas. That's what progressivism is. So it's very disappointing that Democrats are more in favor of it than Republicans.
Yeah, I don't know who and I wonder if they have, I hope they have somebody in mind, because I get why you would petition your school to disinvite a speaker, right? But the list of people who've been disinvited is too long. Like there are people who I think you can take a stand and go, no, not at our school. If it's an official school invitation, if the Republican Party is inviting them, well then you got to let them come. That's it. But you know, I mean, I could see protesting. I know you debated her, but I could see saying no to Ann Coulter.
Right.
But you can't say no to Ben Shapiro. Like, you know, like you don't agree with Ben Shapiro, but you got to let the guy gets to speak. There's no question that he gets to speak.
I don't even care about having Ann Coulter.
Yeah, I don't
Ann
really
Coulter is deeply unpopular, right? Like deeply unpopular. So let her go share her deeply unpopular ideas. Just yesterday, she was calling for death squads to go after immigrants. Like she's a terrible, horrible person.
But I think,
go ahead.
I just mean, I think that to death squads to immigrants, I think if your college is inviting her, you can say, no, we don't have to give a platform to someone who calls for death squads to immigrants. That's too far. Nuking Muslim countries, that's too far, right? Conservatives, who I think have largely deeply popular ideas like Ben Shapiro, but he's got an argument and you should hear him out. And if you want to have a counter protest, fine, but he gets to speak. I just mean there is some line. They can't invite anyone. If they said, like I said, where Heinrich Himmler's coming in to speak, right? You could say, no, we're not going to hear from Joseph Stalin. We're not going to hear from Himmler, right? I think to me that's okay.
But at the same time, it's a tough line to draw.
It is a tough line to draw, but I could draw it.
Here's the thing. Here's another thing.
I'm the guy to draw it, yeah.
Here's another thing to keep in mind. Just because they're not gonna go, let's say these students are successful and they stop who they consider an offensive speaker from speaking on their campus. That doesn't like brush the situation under the rug and that's it. That person can't spread their message anymore. They can and they will spread their message